If you love classic contemporary Christian music and the people that made it, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to help support us and keep us going. This is Stage Right, and I am your host, John Thorne. They say if you die with a handful of friends, you die a rich man. Well, I have several buses full, and I'm very excited to share them all with you. Welcome to Stage Right. I am your host, John Thorne. Thanks for tuning in today for episode 41. So when I started the podcast last September, I knew I was in for a lot of work, but I didn't really know how much work. We hit the ground running. We haven't taken a week off since last September, 41 weeks in a row. Now, I'm not saying we're going to take a break or anything at this point, but there were a few things that I wanted to have done by now that just have taken longer than I had hoped. Plus, the show takes up more time than I thought it would. So for the last 3 or 4 months, we've been moving slowly, but we've been working on 3 different things that I'll tell you about. First of all, we're going to have a new website. Hopefully, it'll be fully functional within the next month or so. One of the other things is I started converting all the audio files into video files to upload to YouTube. So there's a Stage Right with John Thorne channel where you can go out, like the videos, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, and that will help us out. Plus, I'm uploading some road footage, some music videos, there's some bus footage. There'll be a lot of stuff that I'll put out there eventually. But go to Stage Right with John Thorne on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the videos. That will just help us. Also, the third thing is a store where you'll be able to go buy some stuff to help support the channel. I don't feel right asking people for donations just to listen to me talk every month. I know a lot of people do that. I don't have a problem with them doing it. I just can't bring myself to do it. So we'll have a store where you can buy some merch and support us that way. Some might think, well, you have a show sponsor, Hey Rockstar. Well, sometimes that doesn't mean that the show sponsor covers all the expense of having a podcast. It means they might cover part of it. They might make an agreement where they buy the gifts for the guests that are on the show or whatever. Every sponsor is different, but at the end of the day, I want you to have something to show for your money. So I'll send you to the store as soon as that is finished if you're interested in supporting the show. So my guest today is a dear friend, Mark Meana, who's a lighting legend, but he's better known on planet Whiteheart as Miyagi. Miyagi will be here right after this short word from our sponsor, Hey Rockstar.
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services to generate more leads, more exposure, and more revenue for your business or organization. Let Hey Rockstar amplify your awesomeness.
So one of my dearest friends on the entire planet, and I have to say the entire planet because he spends half of his life in Belize on the beaches of Belize. Please welcome Mark Meana to the show today. Hey Miyagi.
Well, John, I'm glad to be here, and you can even call me Mark. I don't use the nickname anymore.
Oh my gosh, that means you're out of witness protection.
Yeah, it finally got to the point to where I was safe, and they were sick of paying for it.
Okay, so I will do my best to remind myself to call you Mark.
No. You, my friend, always referred to me as Miyagi, and it is something that I cherish, actually.
Oh, well, that means a lot, dude, because to me, you will be forever Miyagi. Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. Do you remember when you and I met?
Actually, no.
Okay, well, let me refresh your memory. So this was before the Tales of Wonder tour, but Dave Eckerman from Whiteheart used to call me and say, hey, if you're not going out to play this weekend with anyone, could you go out and road manage Whiteheart? I'd love to stay home. So I would go out and do that a lot. Well, Dave called me and said, hey, we're doing a couple shows in the Midwest. I was wondering if you could go road manage. We have a lighting guy that's going to be coming down from Michigan, and he's basically going to audition for the Tales of Wonder tour. So I was wondering if you would be able to babysit him, make sure he has everything he needs, make sure the weekend goes off without a hitch. But I really don't want to go. So I said, sure. So we go up get to the first show. You, of course, first one up in the morning, you start unloading your stuff. I walk up to you and I introduce myself as the road manager for Whiteheart, and you are Mark Meana.
Really? That's interesting. Dave, I remember Dave, but I thought Dave always stayed in the office. I don't even remember that Dave used to come out. There's a lot of things I don't remember anymore.
Well, do you remember that first weekend?
It's funny because I remember my first shows with Whiteheart. It was somewhere in Ohio, and I thought they were just giving me a carrot hanging in front of me. Well, this could turn into a tour. It was for 2 shows, and I went and we did the first show, and we setting up the lights, and Rick Florian comes up to me and goes, "Didn't you see on the video how the lights were standing on towers?" I'm like, "Yeah, you want me to do that?" And yeah, if you could. So we ripped the whole system apart and rebuilt it on site and did the show. And I thought, after the 2 shows, I thought, okay, yeah, I'm sure that this was just these 2 shows. But see, I'm trying to remember how this all went down. I got to tell you the story, though. That the guy who was from University of Toledo, who had come and interned for a summer with me, great guy, Matt Gillen is his name. And so I called him up thinking, I need somebody to help me. So I picked him up. I drove the truck to Ohio, picked him up, and then we went and did those 2 Ohio shows. And the first show, he was helping out, and I said, well, I want you to run the show because this may turn into a tour, and if it does, maybe you could do this tour. Then it looked like it was falling apart, so I just went ahead and ran the shows because I wanted to have some fun, because I enjoyed it. And so when we did get more shows, I put Matt Gillen out there, and I got him doing the shows. We got the gig. We're out on the tour. I went out and did like the first couple of shows, but made sure he ran them. In fact, he and another guy were going to do the show, so we went into rehearsal in the warehouse and programmed up the show, and I'd play the songs. I'd make them rehearse it so that everything was going to go smooth, because I really, really wanted to impress the guys.
Right.
So it went out, and it was going fine. So I went back home, and then Dave Eckerman literally was calling me every other day saying, "Man, what's going on out there? The shows aren't happening." What do you mean? It was going fine.
I remember this.
So they had shows in California.
Right.
4 shows. So I flew out, and I was going to do these 4 shows with them. I'm going, "Guys, what's going on?" Everything, so I was helping them a little bit with the setup, but I literally got a toothache after the first show, and Florian took me out to the dentist and got me some they got me some painkillers so I can literally fly back after the four shows and get a root canal. So I was in pain, but I was taking these pain pills, and everything seemed to be going well with these shows. Flew back, got the next morning, went in, got a root canal. Next day, Dave Eckerman calls me and says, "Man, it's not happening." And I'm like, "Not happening? I don't understand." He says, "Well, we got this show here, and we'll see how it goes." So I called the guys, and I told them that there seem to be some problems. So figure out what it is you need to do and see what you can do to correct it.
Right, right.
And Dave called me up the next morning. He said, "Look, it just ain't happening." And I said, "But it was when I was out there." He said, "Well, maybe we need to get a big paper cutout of you standing behind him." So I said, "Well, I don't know what to say." And he goes, "Well, we got this show, and then and then after that, we got a show in Albuquerque, this one in Tempe, and then we're sending your gear home, and you're off the tour." And I thought to myself, I got off the phone. It was like 9:30 in the morning, and I looked at my secretary. I said, "Find out when the next flight leaves for Phoenix." And it leaves, I said, "I got to be there by 5. And it leaves at 11, but you won't make it. The next flight gets in at like 9:30. And I'm like, "I can't. I got to make that one." I grabbed my briefcase, nothing else, ran to the airport. They said, "Well, you'll never make it in time. You missed the first part of the flight." I said, "Doesn't anybody else have something? Where's it connect? Chicago?" So I got on a different flight to Chicago, ran across the airport, and little O.J. Simpson across here. O.J.
O.J. Simpson.
You know, I don't know anything about football, but I did that, got there, and I literally made the most expensive phone call I ever did in my life. I picked the phone up off the back, and this was back in the day when cell phones weren't even,
Right.
most people didn't have cell phones. Pulled the thing off, swiped my card, and called Dave Eckerman and said, "Hey, you think you can have somebody pick me up at the airport?" And he said, "Where? Here in Nashville?" I said, "No, in Phoenix at 4:45. He goes, "Where are you at?" And I said, "Well, as I look out the window, somewhere west of Chicago." And he just busted out laughing. He goes, "I'll make sure someone's there to pick you up." So I walked in that night and I ran. I said, "Man," I walked off the side with Matt. I said, "I got to run the show. So I got to see what's going on." So I started running the show, and we got about into five songs in, and I could just, it was a ballad, so I could talk to Richie Biggs, who was a sound man. I said, "This is the way it is when I'm not here, right? Every day." And he starts laughing. He goes, "Yeah, right." I don't understand what's different. So then Dave, they pulled me aside that night and they said, "If you will stay out here on the tour, your company remains out on the tour."
Right.
And so I literally had nothing. I didn't have toiletries, clothes, nothing. But I sat down with the guys, explained what was happening, and we did another show the next day. I actually had to go to the store, buy some clothes. I got myself a 49er sweatshirt. You'd be impressed with a football sweatshirt.
Yes.
You're even impressed that I know that that's a football team.
I am more than impressed. Yes.
And I remember that sweatshirt. But so I stayed out and did the tour, and I think I was with Whiteheart for, I can't even imagine, 5-8 years, something like that.
Yeah. Well, let me just remind you that you were the reason they hired Odyssey Lighting, not the company itself, not the equipment, but for you. You were my all-time favorite lighting director, period.
Well, I appreciate that very much that you say that. And I used to have difficulty with compliments like that. And it was until I finally, after years of going, it's just simple. You push a few buttons, you turn on some color, you just do, there's nothing to this. It's not brain surgery. And it finally was when I realized that, no, I had a gift.
Yeah, totally.
When I realized I have a gift and it was given to me by God, and that's why it's so simple to me.
Well, you and I have had lots of conversations over the years about this.
Yeah.
You can take a show that you've spent 2 months programming in your warehouse and go out on the road, and live every night, it looks like it's spontaneous. It flows so well. It's just seamless when you do it. You're just amazing.
Well, it's kind of because I program it so I can play with it. Does it get boring just to play playback a recording?
Well, sure, but you're amazing at it.
Which we've, technology nowadays, we've had tours that we've done with video, and it's got to tie in with the video. You just basically kick it in. The video runs the lighting, and you really don't do a whole lot.
Right. Well, there's one other story from that first Whiteheart show you did that I'm looking for. Do you remember anything else from that first weekend with Whiteheart? Looking for something specific.
I have a lot of memories that I don't lock into, and usually I have no clue where we are for a show that day. But that I remember distinctly because I had to pick up Matt on the way into Ohio to do the shows. And we even stopped when I dropped him off at home. We stopped and went to Tony Paco's, which is the Hungarian meatball sandwich from the show MASH. I said, there really is a place, we got to eat there. So
that's awesome.
We stopped and ate there on the way back.
Okay, not the story I was looking for, so I'll just throw it out there. The promoter, the building people and the promoter were worried that your fog machines were going to set off the smoke alarms in the sprinkler systems, so they didn't want you to use the fog machines.
Oh, and actually we did do that at a couple of shows. But the first one, they were worried about it?
Yes, the building guy was losing his mind. We can't use smoke machines or fog machines. It'll set off the sprinkler system. You don't remember that?
No. So what did we do? Fill me in.
Well, we used fog machines and smoke machines, and like you promised them, no sprinklers were set off. No $1 million renovations were ruined.
And we were okay, and we had the show.
We were okay, and we had the show. And as hard as your guys tried to give that tour away, they weren't able to do it because of you.
Things work out.
So I don't even know if I've ever asked you this. How did you even hear about the White Hart gig coming up as a possibility?
Um, Boy, you're asking me questions for so many years ago that it's hard for me to remember. Oh, I know what it was. It was Zio Brothers, was a sound company out of
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Yep, I know Phil really well.
They got the tour and they offered it to me, and I was like, yeah, I can't do it for that kind of money. And but Phil Zio, who I was dealing with, I said, but you know me, Phil. If you run into a problem, just give me a call. I'll take care of you. And I said, but it doesn't make sense for me to do it. So he called me up and told me, oh, well, I found a company that'll do it. And I said, great. and he called me up for those shows and said, this company has done such a terrible job. And literally, they're getting a rental truck and their gear is going home. And I need to cover these last two shows.
Wow.
Can you help me out? And I said, sure.
So you and I have been friends all of these years because of Phil Zio. That's good to know.
Yeah. And Phil Zio I knew because the first tour we did was DC Talk's first tour.
Okay.
We got actually that one, Denny Keatsman, which I think you've already done.
Yeah, Denny's been on the podcast.
We actually did a show in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I had just gotten a bunch of scrollers in for a John Denver show we had to do. And so we got this opportunity to do the show at a church and with this group DC Talks. So I said, well, let's bring the scrollers with us. It was a thing that changed color on the lights back in the early days of technology. And I said, we need some more time playing with them so we know how to use them. So we brought them out, and Denny was really impressed with how much we had set up and what we had set up. And he said, we've got this tour going on. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. So I pitched a proposal to him, actually did up a plot, and I wrote up like a 3-page description of what it was about and did a rendering by hand of what it would look like and so on. And we got the gig.
Nice.
And then when I got 2 rehearsals, that's when I found out the sound company was Zio Brothers, and that's how I got to know Phil Zio.
I love Phil Zio. He is such a good dude. Well, he's an Eagles fan, but he's a good dude anyways. All right. So let's talk about the Tales of Wonder live tour. The actual show started with this remarkable 10-minute countdown from Lasse Olsen from Europe. He was a promoter over there. So they had various people counting down this 10-minute countdown, and then it gets to 0, and then it goes into the intro to Raging of the Moon. Then it goes to the first verse. Everybody in the crowd thinks the band is on stage playing. You got these really cool light effects on the screen, on the back wall, all kinds of crazy stuff going on, this huge crescendo. And then all of a sudden, the band comes in live on the first chorus and blows the roof off the place. What do you remember about that?
Well, I'll tell you what the amazing thing was when we were programming up the show in Nashville, and I had the moving lights, and this moving light glitched, and it came up on the backdrop, and there was a moon. And I didn't even know there was a moon pattern in the light. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. We'll use this, and the moon will just rise. Because when that opening music would play, that tape roll,
right,
I would have the lights flash around, and all of a sudden this moon would rise up on the background.
Yeah.
For that song, and it was a fluke.
Well, you say it was a fluke, but people that aren't good don't get flukes like that, dude. That was just, it was magical. I remember it every night. It was just amazing to watch.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've been blessed over the years with all kinds of things that happen that I wasn't expecting. Mistakes, half the time you make a mistake on something, you go, that looks pretty good. Why don't we take that and blend this in this part? And wow, that's super. Okay, we'll keep that.
Right.
So it's mistakes, because most of the stuff with lighting, especially during that time before the real event of moving lights, was so cliche,
right,
that it was hard to actually find something that was creatively different.
Right. Well, everybody thinks moving lights are common, but dude, we're talking the infancy of moving lights. This was back when Genesis and 1 or 2 acts might have been using moving lights at the time.
Exactly. Yeah, it was definitely. In fact, we didn't have any moving lights. We got this tour, and I had a company out of Chicago was going to rent them. And said, they're not available. And so before the DC Talk tour, and actually, I had to buy some. They had to come in from Europe, and I was freaking out because we only had 2 weeks to get ready for this tour.
Right.
And so I got a call from the distributor. Don't worry, they're at the airport. This is a day before we load in Nashville. And I said, okay, great. So I run down to my airport, and he goes, no, the one in New York City. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me. I'm not in New York City. So Phil Zio was in Philadelphia, and he said, well, we're close enough. We can go pick those up. And they brought them, and I met up with them in Nashville. And those were the first moving lights that we ever owned.
Oh my gosh, those were the golden scans.
Yeah, the golden scans.
I will never forget the goldies. They were so awesome.
Yeah, it was really amazing to have anything that would do high-tech stuff. I never thought I'd ever have anything high-tech. So so I was mighty happy to get that tour, mighty happy how it went. We had a couple of problems. As a matter of fact, we had problems, and Denny asked me if I could be in Chicago at this show because they were having some problems with the lights. So they got the lights out, and I was trying to work on them, and we don't provide the follow spots. It's always somebody local that brings in the lights that the people operate in the back of the room. But they brought them in, and it was Sunday in Chicago, and there was no way to get a hold of the company, and the lights weren't working. So I redirected all my attention to the follow spots and to try to get them going, because they needed 3, and there was 1 out of the 3 that worked. And one of them, I actually had them go get some glue, and I told them non-flammable glue, and I glued the lamp back together, which they get very hot. They're an arc lamp in there, and they get extremely hot. So I was telling the promoter, I said, could we get a couple of fire extinguishers and have them positioned back here? He said, why? Is there pyro in the show? And I said, maybe.
It depends on if this glue holds or not.
Yeah, we'll see if this glue starts on fire, because they brought me model glue.
Right.
Do it. But yeah, it turned out that day I spent my day, instead of fixing my own lights, fixing these other lights and getting them going. And then actually I ran that light while Newsboys was up, just to make sure. And every time it would heat up and start to smell like it was going to start on fire, I'd shut it down. And by the time I did that 3 or 4 times, I think it dried it all out and it wasn't flammable. So we got through the show.
Right. Well, there's something else about lighting, guys, that I don't know if people know this or not. But, dude, you worked your butt off. Every day I toured with you, you were the first one up and the last one to bed every night. You were a machine out there on that Tales of Wonder tour.
Oh, yeah. I was exhausted because on a Christian tour, you're not a lighting guy who just sets up, or a lighting tech or a lighting operator that runs the show. You do it all. So as soon as you wake up, you're in there figuring out how to solve the problems, get the system up, get it functioning, maybe get some dinner and a quick shower, and back out, do 3-hour show, then start right in tearing down and load the truck, shower up, hop on the bus, and get your 6 hours before you wake up in a new city.
Well, and it's not bad enough that you have to fix your own equipment that you're renting to White Hart, but when you go out and have to fix stuff that is a rental thing from a local, like the spotlights.
And that was the thing Denny had a problem with that day. He said, well, this gear still isn't working. I said, well, Denny, what did you want me working on? I thought this was your priority.
Right.
And I said, but if that's your priority, you should have pulled me off the spotlights and put me on the other equipment. Besides, it's only 2 lights and nobody's noticing that those 2 lights aren't working.
Right.
And so Denny and I had a lot of conversations on a lot of things, including when we did the tour in Australia.
Oh yeah, the DC Talk White Hart tour.
Because that was DC Talk and White Hart.
Yes.
And so, do you remember Now, you were on that show because I remember the whole sunning,
Yes.
and Billy out there slapping 2 handfuls of suntan lotion on him, and then that night he has 2 white hands on his sunburned body.
Oh my gosh, Rick Florian was scorched.
Oh my God.
After the first show we did, his skin literally bubbled because he had no pores.
When he took his shirt off, and it was like
Unbelievable.
water blisters all over his body.
Yes.
It was like he was a mutation. I thought he was alien there for a minute.
He emphatically said he was only out at the pool for 30 minutes and got that sunburn. But dude, it was more like 3 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember that because you were musician playing bass then.
Yes, I was.
They needed a road manager, and it's the only time in my life that I was a road manager for a band.
Right. I remember that.
And so I had to deal with Denny, heads with Denny,
Right.
and negotiate because it was a co-headline thing and so on and so forth. So, but because I remember the show where the first one, like we opened and then they would headline, that type of thing, and would flop.
Right.
And they were arguing over time because they put this Australian act on, and now there wasn't enough time for the full show.
Right.
And so we were backstage, and Denny was saying, well, we could get our setup done. We can cut it back in 15 minutes. My guys can do that. They're capable of it. But that still leaves 15 minutes has to be, or half an hour that has to be cut off. I said, well, we got 45 minutes and we can cut off 15. And he goes, well, we have an hour, so we'll cut off 15 minutes off our show. I said, sounds like we got it solved. I remember walking back into the dressing room and everyone's getting ready. And I'm like, guys, got news for you. Your show has to be cut back by 15 minutes. And everybody's like, what are we going to cut? What are we going to do? And they are always panicking. I said, because you only have 45 minutes, because I think it was an hour and we cut back to 45. And they said, well, we were only supposed to have 45 minutes anyway. I said, oh, well, then you're fine. Just do your show.
One of the things I remember the most about that tour with DC Talk in Australia was Chris Michaelesi told me, dude, you have to hear this new song Toby wrote 2 weeks ago. They've never played it live, but they're going to do it tonight. Come out to front of house. So I went out to front of house for Jesus Freak.
Oh, really?
It was obvious that was going to be a huge song for them.
See, that's the kind of stuff you remember because you're a musician, whereas I'm not a musician. I'm a drummer.
Oh, stop it.
So a former drummer and lighting guy. So,
all right. So we're going to get to the former drummer, possible current drummer, lighting guy. There's a really cool story coming up about that. But before we move on, tell everyone how Billy Smiley came up with the nickname for you, Miyagi.
My actual name is Mark Meana, which doesn't even look like it's spelled, but that's how it's pronounced. And Billy was trying from the stage to get my attention. It was early in the first tour, and I'm running the lights. And I remember Richie Biggs was the sound engineer.
Yep.
And I was trying to get ready for the next song, and I'm talking to the follow spots over the comms, so I'm not paying attention necessarily to the stage. And he was trying to get me to say my name, and he's trying to remember Meana. He couldn't remember it, so he said, hey, man, turn these lights on, these people, so I can see them. And I'm like, I turned the lights up. And Richie Biggs just started busting out laughing. He goes, that is perfect. That's your name. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, he just called you Miyagi.
Yeah.
I said, called me what? He said, called you Miyagi. That's your name. That's going to be your nickname. I'm like, okay, sure.
I don't know this for a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the reasons Richie loved that nickname is watching you deal with hands every day. You were so particular with how they hung the lights, how they ran the cables, how they rolled the cables. It was like Miyagi, wax on, wax off.
Yeah, exactly. Show you a little paint in defense.
Yes.
Which the funniest thing is they actually put special thanks to Mark Miyagi on this record. I don't even remember what record. And I looked at it and said, is that how you spell Miyagi? And they went, we don't know. Well, I had to go rent Karate Kid just so I'd learn how to spell Miyagi properly.
All right. Now that we got that out of the way, Go back to Australia. One more story. Tell my listeners about the woman that was describing you to her friend and where your country of origin came into conversation.
Yes, she was a Irish woman who was with the staff, and I would, because I was acting road manager, I would be, working out the details for the band and so on with this person. I hate that I can't remember her name. And she said, Miyagi, that's an interesting name. Is it, it doesn't sound Italian. I said, no, the name is Japanese. And which I'm not Italian either, but that's what she said. Oh, that's interesting. And later in the day, because this is the kind of thing I remember, Kiss was was doing their tour in Australia at the same time.
Yes.
And you, being a big Kiss fan,
yes,
you were the one who, there was this huge billboard, and you're like, you got to get the band out all in front of this billboard and get a picture, and you're giving me a hard time to get this all organized. And this woman is talking to me with another woman and trying to, and I said, excuse me, I have to take the guys out and get a picture taken, but I'll be right back. And the two ladies turned around and they were walking away. And the one I hadn't met before said, Miyagi, that's an interesting name. And she goes, yes, I thought he was Italian. He's Japanese. Which, obviously this is not a video, so people can't see, but I am absolutely not Japanese.
That is one of my all-time favorite Miyagi stories.
My favorite with me, the word Miyagi, is when we did South Africa.
Yes. Okay, so this one's on my notes too. You have to tell this story. Go ahead and do it while we're here. Well,
it was just because we were introduced to the president of South Africa, and we're all in a line, and right. I'm busy trying to get back to the stage because I got too much work to do. Do I really need to be interrupted with this? Okay, fine. I'll go walk through the line. I'll shake his hand. So we're going through the line, and I shake his hand. And this is Miyagi, and he goes, "Oh, is that your first or last name?" And I said, "Nope, only one name, like Madonna, Miyagi." He kind of looked at me and looked at the person, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders, and I walked out.
Like Madonna.
He was probably thinking, who is this?
All right. Well, you brought up South Africa, so let's talk about it. What do you remember the most about those two concerts we did at that soccer stadium?
Well, first off, there were two concerts. Oh, two concerts. It was the same place.
Yes. But if you remember, the 7 o'clock was going to be a dress rehearsal with cameras and everything with a live crowd. Then they emptied out the stadium. A new crowd came in, and they were going to broadcast the 9 o'clock over South African television.
Exactly. So that's the two shows. Which, to me, in my mind, it's one show because it was the Rand Easter show that was going to be televised. At a big arena there, outdoor arena.
Yeah, but it was two crowds, one location, two different concerts.
Yes. But we were there the day before. But I remember even before going there, being all excited about it, going to Johannesburg and, going to South Africa. It's the first time I was ever there. And thinking, okay, so why am I going? Because what are they going to have in South Africa? What are they going to have for lights there? Not knowing that Johannesburg is like Atlanta.
Right, for sure.
And there was a big company there that had massive, it was 4 times the size of any of the tours that we did.
Right.
It was a huge show.
Yeah.
So I was pretty excited about it, and I remember programming up and talking it through and trying to get everything going, and then going for the first show and rehearsing. Even though it was daylight, they said, well, you don't have to run lights. It's a daylight show. And I said, I want to rehearse it so that we're ready for the nighttime show. This is the television show and so on.
Right.
And so it was pretty intense. Are you referring to the producer of the show?
Yes, possibly.
Okay, because it was a German woman.
Yes.
And I remember going to the meeting, and we're like, yeah, I understand about color temperatures and all that, and she's trying to explain the schedule. And I said, so, and she says, like, at 2:04 p.m. and, this many seconds. And I'm like, you mean approximately? She goes, no, this is television. It is exact. It's going to be exactly like this. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. That's fantastic. And so we get up and we're ready to start the show, and the lights are not working. And I'm like, don't worry, guys. We got like at least 15 minutes here before they're going to start the show. The opening act was on the stage. I said, so let's keep working on them. I mean, we got it working for a bit there. I think we just got a problem with the plug. Let's open it up, make sure. And all of a sudden the act on stage goes, thank you, good night, and walks off the stage. I'm like, well, what do we do now for this 15 minutes of dead airs time? And okay, we're moving up the show. And what?
Right.
What happened to this is television? It's right down to the second. I'm not ready. I got, so I was somewhat panicking, shall we say?
Yeah.
And fortunately, God blessed us, and we got everything going by showtime. And I had not only people on comm to tell the spots, but I had a pyro guy, which we can get into that story too. And I had a key light guy, which is basically all the white light that pumps in on the stage for a lot of television shows. And then I was running all the colored and concert type lighting. And they were trying to push more white light on the stage. And so I had told her at the meeting, I said, well, this is rock and roll. It's not going to look like the 6 o'clock news. I'm going to warn you right here and now. And she's, oh, yeah, it'll be fine. So I was telling these guys what to do, and I would tell the key lighting guy, keep backing it down, back it down. Now, you got to black out because I'm going to do this special effect. Guys on the camera, you're going to have to go to a wide shot. And I'm giving all these instructions, and everything clicked in. The guys are following my instructions. Everything is happening. And then all of a sudden, we're on a scaffold, like 3 stories high.
Right.
And I'm feeling someone yanking on my pant leg. And I look down, and here's this German producer, Miyagi, this is television. We must have more light. Oh, okay, here, go ahead. Kick that key light up. Okay, we'll do this. Fine. We got 7 more minutes before we go off the air. We'll just do it the way they want. And we pumped in the key light.
Right.
And it looked like the 6 o'clock news, because it's all white for the last 10 minutes of the show or whatever. She apparently called all these guys. They all huddled up, and I said, wait a second. I'm not invited to this party. You guys were following my instructions, so I'll be down there in just a minute because I had something I had to wrap up.
Right.
And I ran down, and she is standing there with this flashlight with a stick in her hand, like pointing at all these guys and, just scolding them for what the show had been, and because I had asked the key light guy, I said, were they telling you to pump in more light? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, why didn't you do it? And he goes, because what you were telling us to do looked good.
Of course it did.
And we wanted to look like you were making it look. I said, well, great. So she's yelling at them all, and she finally sees me walk up, and she turns and you, Miyagi. I said, hey, these guys were all following my instructions. If there's anyone to blame, it's me. And she goes, then I blame you. And I kind of lowered my head, and I said, and I hang my head in shame. Everybody just busts out laughing, and it was it. It was no big deal. And the show was great.
Oh, man. All right. So before we move on to the safari, because the next day they took us on a 3-day safari.
Oh, that was incredible.
Okay, before we get to the Jeep, though, that was the night. I don't know if you remember during Teardown, those giant castle banners from the Highlands tour got stolen.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Some thievery went on in South Africa. Somebody climbed up those giant scaffolding next to the stage and stole those banners.
Yeah, which was awfully surprising. And I thought, well, at least it wasn't a guitar.
Well, and death defying. It was like 50 feet in the air.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so one more story from the South African soccer stadium. It had to do with pyro. They didn't shoot the pyro off during the first show because they didn't want to have to reload it. So,
Right, and they didn't want to blow it during the day.
right. So tell everyone what happened during the second concert when the pyro went off during Flame Passes On.
Well, first off, quite frankly, there was so much pyro there. I was like, are you competing because Kiss is in,
Right.
coming here next week or something? Or what do you do? Because it was an astounding amount of pyro beyond what Disney would use.
Dude, and it was just, you could tell that just with it laying on the stage.
Yeah, it was way too much. It was over the top.
Right.
What happened is they were cueing the pyro. I talked to them about what their effects were, and I said, well, this song is this song is this. Probably that would be a better effect during this song. In fact, I was disappointed that I don't think we got the right thing. They had this thing that had flames, and the flame passes on. I'm like, oh, that'd be great with the flames.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to put a lot more into it. But at one point, they blew off pyro that just about the whole stage went up in flames, it seemed. And it was all around Gersh's keyboards.
Yes, and I had the best seat in the house for this because I watched it 5 feet away in real time, and I had everything I could do to keep playing because I was dying laughing through this whole thing. So as we played the song, The Flame Passes On, the flames were supposed to shoot straight up in the air and just surround him. But the wind was blowing like 25 miles an hour into our face.
Oh, that's right.
And it was like every one of those flames was landing on Gersh's arms like a fountain. It was like it was pointed right up and then down. And it was insane. His keyboard got scorched. His arms got singed. His hair got singed.
And it's amazing that he just kept playing on.
Right. And so to go with the fire and the flames that are singeing him and singeing his hair and stuff was all this smoke came with it. And by the end of the song, there was so much smoke on the stage, you couldn't see any of us. It was like he had been completely consumed by a cloud of smoke.
Can I back you up a second? Because
Sure.
Do you remember that when we went there, everybody was scared for us to go?
Yeah, of course.
And the reason was because there had just been...
On the cover of the USA Today, it said 31 massacred in Johannesburg.
Yeah. And it was shortly before we went to Johannesburg.
Well, it was actually the day before because the cover of USA Today, the day we flew from Miami to Johannesburg, was 31 massacred in Johannesburg. Nelson Mandela had just been let out of prison. Apartheid was ending and people were upset. It was crazy what was going on.
Wow. Hey, speaking of which, wasn't that the place we got off the plane and there were crowds at the airport
Yes.
to eat White Hart?
Yes. Yep.
And we come rolling around with our luggage, and it's like, it was like the Beatles coming over from England.
I know. Yeah, it was. It was South Africa.
I haven't thought about that since probably the day after it happened.
Right. Well, I have 4 or 5 guys that have emailed me and reached out to me that listen to the podcast from South Africa.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah. Like some of the guys that listen to the podcast were at the concert.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Well, you get listened to all around the world because I listen to your podcast and I'm in Belize when I do it.
I know, which still trips me out that any of my friends take time to listen to me talk.
But it's kind of crazy because now here I am in Michigan and you're in Michigan.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, boy, this would have been a lot more fun if we'd set up a couple of mics, made a little studio, made like a little radio interview thing. We could have done it together face to face.
We could have, but then it would have been like an interview and not a phone conversation.
Well, it's funny because I have advertisements in the States for my business in Belize, and I called in my voice so it sounds like it's on a phone on the radio ad. So
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome, which we did, by the way, have lunch beginning of last week, or was it 2 weeks ago?
yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
No, I think it was the beginning of last week.
Yeah.
So it was a good time. Good time as always.
Well, anytime that I'm in Michigan, we always figure out a way to get together somehow.
Yes. Okay, so let's continue on our South African journey. We are now at the Mabula Lodge, 3 of the best days of my life. What do you remember about our 3-day safari?
Well, the most incredible thing was the fact that they did it for us.
Mm-hmm.
They covered all the expenses
Yep.
for us to literally have a vacation, because it was cheaper to do that than it was to fly us right back the next day.
Yeah, for sure.
And what an amazing blessing that is to have been given an opportunity like that, especially for me, who travels around the country
Working hard.
most of my life with people and groups and so on. And everybody, oh, you must have seen just about everything in the world. And I'm like, no, I see the inside of 4 walls every day, and I'm in a new city, and in between that I'm sleeping. So it's not like I really see anything
Right.
when I go on these trips. And to go all the way to South Africa and turn around and come back, because I've done that. I've gone all the way to London and literally never left the airport, and turned around and came back because there was a problem with the show.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
That was the amazing one. It was like, are you kidding me? We're not even staying and having dinner? Nope. We're getting right on a plane and heading back. So
That's bad routing.
it was even fun going to it, the anticipation of going. And we had 2 vans, and they had the drivers. And I was with John. Billy was in my van. John Knox was in my van. And I'm trying to think of who else was with us. But at one point, and I'm joking around, Dave Bond.
Sound man, Dave Bond.
First time I met him, he went to do sound. And we connected, and it was just hilarious comedy all the time. And we were just having such a great time. And at one point, I'm telling Billy he's got a bee climbing up his neck, because he's sitting reading a book while we're going there. And yeah, Miyagi, right. And I'm like, no, seriously, you have a bee crawling. And he wouldn't believe me. And finally, this bee crawls up and gets on his ear. And he notices it, and he freaks out and panics. And then he's like, oh, I can't believe that. Is that a killer bee? Am I going to die? And I'm like, did you get stung? And he goes, no. And I'm like, then you ain't going to die. It doesn't matter what kind of bee it is. If you ain't get stung, you're fine, Billy. But he's busy trying to beat this bee to death in the back of the van.
All right, so we get to the Mabula Lodge, and we divide up. There's 2 Jeeps. We had the quiet Jeep. You had the loud Jeep. In our Jeep, it was me, Gersh, Billy, Brian Wooten, and Rob, and our driver was Anita. In your Jeep, you had Dave Bond, Alan Ditch, Rick Florian, yourself, and Dave Bond. So I don't know if you remember, but what was the significance of our driver, Anita? Do you remember that? It's because Rob toyed around with the idea of moving to South Africa just so he could date her.
Well, that's true, but Rob almost moved anywhere in the world because he always fell in love with someone wherever we went.
Right. Well, the thing I loved about Rob is he always had his adventure hat on. He was never afraid.
Yeah.
He would always visualize himself living wherever we were. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll try something different.
All right. So do you remember what happened the first night we were there after we did our initial trip around the Serengeti in the Jeeps?
I do. And that was after we had done our first little
Yes, the first run.
run with the Jeeps. And I got to tell you, Dave Bond had a camera. He was into photography, and he's taking pictures. And I'm like, what are you taking pictures of? We're not even seeing anything. We're an hour into the trip, and we don't see anything. And amazingly, I can't even remember your name right now, but I can remember Phineas was the name of our driver, which is a strange name. But he would say things, and then they'd call, because we were at the very back of the Jeep hanging out, joking and laughing. And they said, oh yeah, there's some rhino dung on the road, so we're likely to see rhinos. So I'm like, you know what? We haven't seen anything. We're not going to see anything. They got people out there, on their radios. Sector 6, the rhino dung is getting a little dry. Can you get out there and water that stuff? We're making these kind of jokes, about we're never going to see anything.
Well, you guys were so loud. We could hear you coming from a mile away, literally.
Oh, we were excited. We were in Africa, and it was an amazing time and beautiful weather.
Stunning.
And so finally, the Jeep pulls over, and he says, quiet down so you don't scare the giraffes. And I'm like, the giraffes? What giraffes? And he said, those. And I turned to my left, and here, eating in the trees,
Yep.
not too far away from us, are like 3 giraffes. And like it felt like that moment in Jurassic Park when he turned and saw the first dinosaur.
Yes, exactly.
And because they almost looked animated, because you weren't expecting, really they were going to be out in the wild and that close and everything. And he tried to started up the Jeep, tried to get a little closer, and he shut it down so we can hear, because it scared them, and they were galloping off into the distance. And it was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. Let's go find those rhinos.
Right.
And it was just an amazing time. But Rick didn't care about all the big animals. He would literally stop the Jeep and get out and pick up dung beetles.
Huge bugs, and Rick would get down in the dirt and play with them.
Huge. I mean, they're the size of my fist.
Yeah, just crazy.
And a centipede, millipede. What do they call those things? It looks like a huge worm with tons of legs.
Centipede.
But it was long. It was like 6 inches long, and it looked like it had a hard shell. Looked up like the size of a ballpark frank when you cook them. And he was so fascinated by those things.
Oh my gosh, Rick Florian, the dung beetles, the elephant poo. I can't believe he got down in that stuff with his biology degree and played with those bugs. It's remarkable that Rick Florian did not die while we were in Africa.
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services for your church to generate more interest, create more exposure, and reach more people. Let Hey Rockstar amplify the awesomeness of your ministry. And, as always, Hey Rockstar is a proud sponsor of the Stage Right with John Thorne podcast.
My thanks to you for listening today. Thank you, Hey Rockstar. My special thanks to Mark Meana for being my guest. Next Friday, part 2 of my conversation with Miyagi. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone.